9:30. Just gone 9:30. Here he is.
Oh, Callum is quicker than you, Russ, on your own show.
I was watching you guys join, and I couldn't get in. Like I'm pressing request to join, and nothing's happening.
Yeah, that's usually what happens.
What's up, Callum?
How are you, Mr. Russ? You okay?
I'm good. Listen, before we start, for the record, we both love Saudi Arabia. Just for the record, we love Saudi.
No, okay. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
I'll let Callum elaborate on that.
Obviously, I've had 2 good wins there, and Usyk's had a very good win there most recently, and Russ was a part of all of it. So I think Russ likes it better than me, I think.
Yeah, it's and we call the right fight, and the things go as we say, and they work almost instantaneously, and it's a great feeling, man. It's a great. I mean, obviously a fighter wins. It's no better feeling in the world when a fighter wins, but when you're in there and you feel you're part of it, and you've made a contribution to the fighter winning, it's great. You know, like I felt good when, in the first fight when Usyk fought Joshua and Usyk got cut. I felt good afterwards when Usyk said how, I was involved, I helped. Same thing when Callum fights. It's that's going to always be one of my greatest memories. Is the Groves fight, our first visit there.
It was today, wasn't it?
Yeah. What's that?
It was 4 years ago today.
4 years ago today.
Yeah.
Wow, check it out.
Wait, was that the first fight you guys worked together, Russ? When did you and Callum start working together?
Not the first fight we worked together.
No.
The first fight in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, the first one. Saudi, wasn't it?
It was the first fight in Saudi Arabia that we worked, and I still hear Anthony Crawler's voice in my head after you stop him, and he's just standing under saying, "You called it, Russ. You called it, Russ." And I still hear his voice and his accent, and saying that, because at the end of I think you stopped him in the 9th round, right?
No, 7.
Okay, end of the 6th round. When he comes back, just before he goes out, I slapped him on his chest. I slapped him quite hard, because I wanted his attention. I said, "Throw the left hook, throw the left hook." He walked out there, boom, it was over. And it was like, what? It was great. It was a great feeling. It was a great feeling because you've been trying the right hand all night, so that was great. So we first started working together. The first time I wrapped your hands was in California.
Yeah, California. That was 2014, I think.
There you go.
Now, so how many between Callum and Lee and Beefy? You've been in the Smith corners for quite a few times there, for quite a few fights, Russ.
And some big wins too. Yeah.
And now,
for the record, Callum pays better than Beefy. Just for the record.
That as well.
Well, Callum, there's a lot to get to, of course, with your career and your relationship, of course, with Russ as well. But one of the reasons we wanted to have you on is that you seem to be on a course at the light heavyweight division. Since you moved up to 175, you've had back-to-back incredible knockout wins. So do you regret a little bit moving up maybe sooner, or how good do you feel now at 175?
Yeah, I feel good. I feel very good. I feel it was probably needed, and I feel my body's benefited from the move up. In terms of regrets, no, look, I can't regret anything in my career. You can't afford to sit and dwell on stuff, and everything leads to where you are now. I do think I stayed there a little bit too long, but it's easy looking back and saying that now. At the time, I was world champion. I was in a very good position, and I wanted to keep my belt as long as I could. I worked so hard to win it. I waited so long to get it. I didn't want to just vacate and move up. And I think when it started to affect me performances, I kind of picked other reasons, like lack of motivation, this, that, rather than blaming the weight. I think that's the last thing you want to admit. I've outgrew the weight. I always thought, no, I can do it. I can do it properly. I can do it. And I think at the end, it just reached a point where it was taking that little bit away from me performances. And as we've seen in the Canelo fight at the very highest level, you can't afford to underperform against those type of people. They'll beat you if you have an off night. And no, he beat me well on the night, and that was give me the green light. That I didn't have any belt, so it was I made the decision to move up, and I feel a lot better.
A great segue into that, mentioning Canelo. So since then, the loss to Bivol, and then the fight, if you will, against I don't know what else to call it. Sparring session, or against Golovkin. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it was a bit. say a little bit underwhelming, but I didn't expect much from the fight, to be honest with you. I think Golovkin was not the Golovkin we seen 4 or 5 years ago. No, he was an animal back then, and I think we seen with the first 2 fights, they were both very evenly matched. I thought Golovkin won the first one, and I don't think you could argue he won the second one. I thought Canelo got it, and no, there was no complaints. But since that fight, I think Golovkin has aged a lot since, and I thought on the night, I think you've seen it, he was a shell of himself. I thought the scorecards were a lot closer than what the fight was, but I do believe Canelo probably should have done a better job on that version of Triple G than what he did.
Do you see a chink in the armor? Do you see something affecting Canelo? Do you think the loss to Bivol took effect on him, or?
Possibly, yeah. I don't know. I think it's hard to say he's aging himself, but he's 32 himself. He's had a long career, a lot of hard careers, and I don't know. He's a very, very good fighter. No, I rate him very highly. I just don't think he seems to not really put his foot on the gas as much as he used to. He seems to be a very reserved, and I don't know, not lazy, but he doesn't really go through the gears as much as I believe he used to. I don't know whether he kind of knew he had the fight won against Golovkin, but I'd like to have seen him.
I think that the two things, if we look at the 2 fights, Bivol, I think he tried to put his foot on the gear, and I don't think Bivol let him. I think Bivol stayed right there with him and stuck behind that jab and really made it a difficult fight. And I don't think he faded the way Canelo expected him to. Yeah. And in this fight, I felt like he was up against almost zero resistance, and he's just kind of winning. So it's almost like he didn't feel a need. Yeah,
that's what I think. He knew he had the fight won. He didn't really have to overexert himself to finish strong. The fight was in the bag, and I think even when Golovkin had a little bit of late on, I think it was more Canelo took his foot off the gas. He can't say he had the fight won. The fight for me was won after 6 rounds. I don't believe Golovkin won a round early on, but it wasn't anything like the first 2 fights, put it that way. And I think it was billed it was going to be, and I don't think it was ever going to be.
And I'm sorry to rush here. Let me just interject for a second. I know that you and Canelo have the same age, and you don't want to make excuses for the weight, but the way you've looked at 175, if Canelo chooses to go back up and fights Bivol and wants to stay in that division, is that a fight you think that maybe eventually you could avenge that loss to Canelo, that your paths could cross again?
Possibly, but I'd need the belt. He's not going to just fight me for no reason. He beat me once.
Yeah.
No reason to go back over it. If I had something he needed, then the fight could happen. And again, no, I want to fight Canelo. When I wanted to become a world champion, and obviously I believe at 175 you'd see a better version of me, but I'm not going to sit and make excuses up for the fight. He beat me fair and square, and that's that. I would love a chance to put it right. I think we all, it's the only loss on my record, it's the only blemish on my record. I'd love a chance to correct it at some point, but for now the goal is to become a world champion.
Callum, you've been involved in the negotiations with Canelo. Like, we know, how difficult that could be. And one of the things I mentioned to Matthew earlier when we spoke was that I was at the press conference when Canelo beat Cotto. And leading up to that press conference, there was all the talk about him fighting Triple G. He beats Cotto. The first question that's asked of him at the press conference is, okay, when do you fight Triple G? And De La Hoya took the podium and said, well, we're not sure, and we got to see, blah, blah, blah. And it went for another year or so, or 2 years after that, before they even fought again.
Went back down to 154 to fight Liam.
That's right. That's right. He went,
yeah.
And that's right. That was after that, correct? He went down. Yeah, that's right. And then he makes him wait 4 years for the third fight. Surely this has to tarnish him some way in terms of his so-called legacy. Or do you think people don't care?
A bit of both. I like what Triple G said when Canelo was saying it's personal, I don't like him, and Triple G was saying, well, it can't be that personal. It took you 4 years to fight me. So I do get that sense. No, I think he's a smart man. He's let him age. I think he's seen what everyone else seen. The Murata performance, the Polish fella he boxed the year before, although he won and stopped him, it wasn't the same type of G we'd seen, and I think he was out for over a year between those two fights. So I think he knew the time, and I don't think it was a risky fight as what it was 4 or 5 years earlier. So look, he's clever. In 10 years' time, people will look back and Canelo beat him twice and he drew the other one. I don't think people will look too much into the gaps in between. But yeah, I think it was a smart move, and no, you've got to feel a bit sorry for Triple G.
And Callum, you keep on mentioning though that you want a title at 175. You look really good, and it's the question Russ doesn't want to ask because of course it puts him in an uncomfortable spot. But
I
the
know.
man who has 3 belts is Artur Beterbiev.
Yeah.
Is that the fight you think is going to happen for you within the next 12 months?
Possibly, yeah. I think that with the way the route's gone, he's got 3 of the belts, so 3 routes out of 4 lead to him. And mandatory challenging now for the WBC. And look, he's a good fighter, and I know that. Russ knows that. But he's not invincible. And I believe, I'm performing very well at 175, and I'm going to become a world champion then. I believe it within the next 12 months of when it'll happen.
And so Russ, is there a way Callum Smith could fight Dimitri Bivol instead? Maybe now Bivol has to fight against Zurdo. I know in the rankings you're closer though to one of Arthur's belts, Callum. So what do you make of like you look at Arthur and you said he's not invincible, but what do you know of him? Have you been watching a lot of his fights already?
Look, I knew him in the amateurs. I was at a training camp in Russia with him in I think 2010-11. I knew of him then. He was at 91 kilograms then, which is technically cruiserweight. He's come down, and look, he's a good fighter. He's knocked everyone out. He's got 3 belts. I'm not going to sit here and say he's not, but look, he can be hit. He has been hit. My old gym mate put him over. He's been over twice in professional. So I think when you see other people do it, I believe I can do it as well. It's not going to be easy, but I do believe he is beatable, and he's not getting any younger. He's had a long, tough career himself. So it's a good fight, but I believe on my day I can beat anyone in the world. I said that at 168 and I proved it, and I believe I can do it at 175, and I'm doing everything I can to put myself in the right position to get the right fights.
And as a result of Canelo losing to Bivol, now that rematch is going to happen again. So Callum's going to get pushed aside. Like there's not going to be no hope of making that fight until Canelo says, we can fight Bivol. So, but I think Callum, me and you've spoken about this before. Badu Jack once said to me, and we've all experienced this. I think I might have mentioned this to you. There are some guys when you're at the amateur tournaments, you're in the dressing room and guys are fighting, And I know in my time when we knew Roy was fighting, you'd sneak out of the dressing room because you'd want to go see Roy fight. You'd want to see Roy. Yeah. And Badu Jack said to me, he says, Beterbiev was one of those guys, and Lomachenko was one of that you'd sneak out of the, you'd go out of the dressing room, if you had time between your fight and watch them fight. That's how special they were.
Yeah, very good. There was a lot. Usyk was the same. Obviously, they met each other in the Olympics, but a lot of the times you go to countries and you're fighting a Russian. You don't really know the name, but there's certain ones you know the name of, and they're getting medals in all the tournaments, and they always seem to perform when it matters. And Beterbiev had a very good amateur career. I think he was world champion at 91, then comes on and went back at 81. It was after the Olympics and stuff. And no, he was the world champion at 81, then went up to 91. Sorry, is it Makontiev was the 91, and they can't just swap weight divisions.
Right.
He ends up winning gold at London at 81. But look, he's a very good fighter with a good amateur career. And I just said with Loma, he's another special amateur, and the ones who seem to move over and do the same in the professionals. It's not the same sport, so it's good to see when people can reach the very top in both of them. And a lot of fighters don't manage to do it once they turn over, and them two obviously have.
Your thoughts, because you mentioned Usyk, the Usyk Joshua rematch. I mean, you were there. I don't know if you got to see it or how close you were and got to see it. Your thoughts?
It was a better fight than the first one to watch. I don't think Joshua went for him as much as people expected, but I do believe he was better early on, even though he was still standing off and boxing with him. He was having a little bit more success, I thought. Obviously, late on, round 9, he went for him, but I think once it got late on in the fight, it kind of turned into the first fight again. He was standing in front of him a little bit more, becoming a less moving target, and Usyk started to pick him off a bit. But I thought the first round exactly crash bang wallop, but it was exciting to watch. The two of them were trying to trigger each other and set tasks for each other, and Joshua was landing as well as Usyk. It was a good fight for say 6 to 8 rounds, and then I feel after that Usyk kind of pulled away.
Were you surprised after the 8th or 9th round when Joshua started landing solid shots? It looked like he had Usyk backpedaling, and then Usyk comes out, I think it was in the 10th, and just like dominated the round.
Yeah, I think that's it's a bit of both. I think it's a sign of a top fighter. I think Mayweather done the same the rounds after he got rocked by Mosley. He come out the next round and basically just took him apart, and I think that shows a top fighter. And I also think Joshua emptied the tank trying to get rid of him, and I think from then on he was gassed, and I think that's when Usyk kind of just pulled away. But yeah, I think that's the sign of a top fighter. Most fighters have probably weathered the storm and then probably played a bit safe, but he just come out and spun the fight right back in his favour, and like I say, he pulled away late on. Joshua was more of a sitting target then once he was tired.
Did you ever believe for a second that we were going to see Fury and Anthony Joshua?
No. I think even if we ever do see it, I don't think it'd be now. I think it's a little bit too rushed for a fight of that magnitude. You can't rush it and put it all together in less than 10 weeks. I think it wouldn't do the fight justice. It's a huge fight, regardless of whether Joshua's coming off 2 losses to Usyk. That fight's still massive, and it just seems a little bit rushed trying to get together for December the 3rd.
Now, also, Russ, here with Anthony Joshua, it's interesting because you're making the tie-in from the fight with Usyk. A lot of also what was said, especially in the UK, Callum, was the reaction post-fight. And I just want to maybe put in perspective for people here who are not from the United Kingdom. It seems like it's the hotbed of boxing right now. UK is where you get the most fights, the most fanfare currently in the world of boxing. So do you think the pressure, do you relate to what Anthony Joshua, kind of how he reacted, or as somebody who's a bit more, I know yourself, who's taken losses differently, were you a bit disappointed by his reaction?
Yeah, obviously, I wouldn't say disappointed, because he's his own man. He can do what he wants. I think with Joshua, because he was such in the limelight from early on, he's always had to say the right things at the right times, and he can never really say anything wrong because he's overly criticised for it. And I think it's just, for years and years, he probably wanted to just let a little bit of anger out. Obviously, the 2 losses, and it's not nice when 1 minute everyone's singing your praises and then you lose to a top fighter like Usyk, and everyone kind of forgets about you as if you're not. No, it's not like he's just went and lost to anyone. He's lost to probably one of the best, if not the best pound-for-pound fighter out there at the moment, and all of a sudden just dismiss him. And I think it was a bit of frustration in that side of it, as they give me a bit of credit. I've just had a good, closest fight with the best fighter out there, and I think he just wanted a little bit more credit than what he gets. And I think probably one of his team members probably should have took the mic off him and stopped him, digging a bigger hole for himself. But I don't condone it, but I kind of understand where it was coming from. I think it was just a bit of built-up frustration, what he hasn't been able to let out because of the platform and the limelight he's under.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think they've put him under too much of a microscope, especially losing to somebody like Usyk. Like, you didn't lose to a scrub, you lost to a...
Like he did, though.
They treated him like, he was never good in the first place. You just lost to the best guy. And he's lost to one guy twice. It's not like he lost to 2 different guys. One guy.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, because, it's something interesting that from the fighter perspective, Russ, you talked about how you kind of understood where Joshua was coming from. And Callum, having over 100,000 followers, you are also in the limelight, especially when you had the Canelo fight and you got even more eyeballs then. Like, how do you balance that pressure sometimes especially with social media and the reaction from some fans are respectful, some are not? How do you balance between kind of that mental pressure and everything that goes around being a professional fighter of your status?
I think you've got to just learn to just focus on you and your close people. Social media, it's great when you've got a lot of fans saying nice things about you, but you can't really take too much notice of it, because the minute you start saying bad things about you, you can't really take too much notice of it. You've got to just take a bit of pinch of salt. It's nice to have it, social media, but put the phone away and be in in the real way with the people who mean the most to you, know, your close family members. They'll tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear and stuff. It's not, although they are real people, a lot of them just say stuff to get reactions from you. You've got to just learn to just say focus on what's around you rather than what's on social media.
And you know, in speaking of that, when it becomes, you know, somebody like Anthony, who is first of all so big, it's impossible that you don't recognize him. Like Callum could possibly walk through somewhere and people don't recognize him. But if you're Anthony Joshua, you're getting on a flight somewhere, you're going shopping, there's no way you're not getting noticed of who you are. And that pressure is immense. And I always remember saying about, you know, Elvis Presley couldn't take his daughter to the park and play in the park. You know what I mean? Like, it's a difference in life. And I remember being in Liverpool. I don't remember who we were with, Callum, but there was a football star that we were with, and we had to walk through the mall up by the hotel real quick, and he put his hood on because if he stopped for 1 second, that was it. Like all people were going to just be all over him, you know? So it's not an easy life. And that's one thing that's very bad about the keyboard warriors who are quick to hail criticism at these fighters or athletes of what they have to live up to. You know, I know you want to be there, they're a hero, you want to take a picture, but when you start taking shots at somebody like an Anthony Joshua who has achieved what he's achieved, I mean, 2-time heavyweight, forget 1 time. I mean, we all think, oh, you became 1-time heavyweight champion, 2-time heavyweight champion of the world. You only lost to Usyk, Olympic gold medalist. I mean, this is a resume that anybody, any human would gladly have.
Yeah.
You criticize? Get the fuck out of here, man.
So you didn't experience any of that after the Canelo loss, Callum. You were focused, or did you have a bit of a down moment because it was the first time you lost in a big fight? Because you responded extremely well since. Yeah,
look, obviously it wasn't nice, and I've always been brought up to be, you know, a good winner and a good loser. I was respectful, and I think Russ probably seen after it. I was crying my eyes out in the change room for a good half hour. So no, it's hard to take, especially as a fighter, when you go on no longer beat and run. You kind of build this invincibility about you, and you forget what it's like to lose, and you believe on your day you'll beat anyone in the world. And though you know everyone can lose and does lose at some point, you kind of never believe it'll be this fight. So it was hard to take, but I just kind of, if I wanted to move on and become a better fighter, I knew I had to accept it and take it on the chin. I couldn't blame certain things or other people, because I wouldn't learn from it then. It'd be, all right, well, I only lost because of that, I'll be fine next time. Whereas I knew I had to just take it on the chin, and it kind of highlighted areas what I needed to improve on. So obviously I had a rest with my family, and then I made changes to my team, made changes moving forward, and moved over to train with Buddy McGirt, and just highlighted areas what I felt I needed to improve on to make sure it didn't happen again. And I believe I have. I believe I've improved in the 2 camps I've had with him, and I believe it, as bad as it is at the time, I do believe if you take it right, it can make you a better fighter.
Russ, I mean, it's not an easy thing, right, to come back from a loss and look and make improvements, but accountability seems to be there. And I don't know technically, Russ, if you've seen anything different, but the placement of your power, Callum, in the last 2 fights at 175 seems to me like you could knock out anyone in that division if you land cleanly. Yeah,
that's exactly. No, I do believe. Again, and when I went to Buddy, the focus wasn't really improve your power. I think that was just natural with me. You know, myself moving up at the extra few pounds. Buddy's big on moving, like getting your jab better, your position of your feet, where you are when you throw certain shots, not be too close, not be too far away, and just ring generalship and boxing IQ. I feel that's what I've improved on, and defensively getting my head moving a little bit more and stuff, and just improve as an all-round fighter. I think the power side of things has probably come with, let's say, the natural moving up, but just relaxing and throwing shots and not looking for the power, just kind of flowing a little bit more rather than tensing up when you're throwing. I believe the first camp was good with Buddy, and then the second we built on it a little bit more, and I'm looking forward to getting back in camp with him. And I do believe I still am improving as a fighter, and I know what it takes to become a world champion. I know the level it needs to be at, and obviously being in Canelo, I know there's still more levels above that, and the aim's to get up there, and I do genuinely believe I can become another world champion at 175.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Callum, and I think I know you well enough. The disappointment that Callum felt, of course, you always want to win, but against Canelo, was we couldn't land. Like it didn't seem to have that impact, that landing that we could have done to maybe give us a chance at winning that fight. It always seemed like he wasn't there. He was harder to hit than we expected. He was quicker. I think that was there was also the frustration of that.
Yeah, that's what I said after it. People always go, oh, how hard does he punch and stuff? And look, his power's is decent. It's not off the scale. He can punch, but it was more his defence. He was a lot harder to clean than what I anticipated. And like you see the little videos on Instagram against Daniel Jacobs and stuff, and you think, well, I'd be able to land if you were him at me. And I just felt like even after I'd land a jab, and then after the jab, he kind of, even if it does land, he kind of takes the power out of it and stuff. So even when you do land, you think, well, you didn't really have much of an effect on you because he kind of takes the power out of it. And that's what surprised me more than anything, just his defensive skills, which I don't believe he gets enough credit for.
Yeah. And Callum, the one thing that's interesting is that there's not been many brothers who faced the same opponent, even though it's at different weight classes. And I don't know if you can talk about your relationship with Beefy and just being from a fighting family. Does that make it that you guys are just more competitive from the get-go, or is he more competitive than you? How does that go happening?
Hey, I'm going to answer that.
Go ahead.
Beefy's more crazy. Beefy's more competitive than anybody. It doesn't matter in what it is.
Yeah. I think Russell Tyree's been in our company. Whatever we do, we're competitive. But Liam's on another level. Whatever it is, Liam wants to win at, or he'll bet you that he'll beat you at it, and he won't do anything for free. It's okay. I'll put money on. I'll bet you. I'll beat you at it.
That's right.
He's off the scale. But yeah, it's good coming from a boxing family. It's good to just have people who, especially being the youngest, I've got people who've always been there before me and done it, so they're always good for advice. And I just believe as a child, watching them do stuff when it was my turn, it felt like I'd been there before. I was never overawed by any occasion and stuff, because I'd always felt like I'd been there before. So I do definitely feel it. I have benefit from it, and I think we all have. I think we all kind of bounce off each other. We train together. We spend time together outside the gym. So it is definitely good, and we all support each other and want each other to do well when it comes to boxing. But anything else, we're very, very competitive.
And the thing is, though, what I will say about this, nobody ever asks the other to do something that they're not prepared to do themselves. So when they're yelling from the corner, when they get in the ring, they do the same thing, so they practice what they preach. And Beefy can be just as competitive, outside the ring when he's encouraging. And so can Paul as well. He can be just as competitive.
Who's better at snooker, Russ, you or Liam?
What's that?
Who's better at snooker, you or Liam?
Oh, come on. You saw him come back to the hotel in Saudi. You know.
So that's why, Russ, you like Saudi so much. You had your snooker club.
Well, you see, there's nothing else to do, so he had to hang out with me. There's no bars to go to. There's no clubs to hang out at. There was the snooker club. He had to come out. That's what we had to do. So, and this time, to avoid that, he's going to tell you it's because he had a fight, right? But he only flew in the day of the fight and then flew out. Got in, out of town, out of town. Got in, got out. Yeah.
Well, how does that balance, Callum, work now with the training? With the fact, are you going to the States or does Buddy come to the UK? How does that training camp session work?
We split it both ways. Obviously, my last two fights have been, one was in Saudi, but the first one was in the UK. So the first one I went out to LA for 6 weeks, and then Buddy come back here for 4. And then last time I went out for, I think it was 3.5, and Buddy come back here in the UK for 6. So it's just, I'll start camp over there, depending how long I do over there, and then Buddy will come over to UK. So we kind of split it even, which is good. It's a good balance. It's good to go over there. I enjoy LA. It's out of my comfort zone, and then it's good to be back home in Liverpool, and I think Buddy enjoys it as well, which is good. So it's a good balance, and I say if you've got a good partnership, we work well together.
Callum, before we let you go, Conor Benn and Chris Eubanks. Now, how much news is that making back home? How much noise? How excited is the general boxing public about this fight?
Yeah, it's got a lot of publicity, good buzz about it. To be fair, I think the DAZN are doing a good build up about it to get everyone excited, and it's an interesting fight. I think that's why people will want to see it. There's a lot of question marks on how the weight's going to fare and stuff like that, and it obviously the two fathers is the main selling point. But I think in terms of an actual fight, it is an interesting one. I think personally, Eubank's too big for him. It's a middleweight via welterweight, but with the catch weight and then the rehydration, which I'm not too sure what it is, but you don't know whether that'll play a part in the fight and even it up a little bit. So, look, it's exciting. It's one I watch as a fan. It should be good. Who do you think wins, Russ?
I'm like you. I'm thinking about the weight, the size. I'd like to think that Chris, despite what he's saying, is taking the fight more seriously than he's doing, which I believe he is. But I just always have a wondering. I mean, I know money is a great influencer, but I always think, why would Conor Benn take a fight if he didn't think he could win? True. And I think he believes he can win. And, you know, listen, Carmen Basilio went up from welterweight and fought Sugar Ray Robinson. You know, there's you can believe. And sometimes, and I've seen this happen with fighters, you move up and you have an easier time fighting a bigger guy because all of a sudden everything seems so much slower. And then when you fight a smaller guy, things are happening a lot quicker. And if it's not a wrestling match, if there's not a lot of infighting or grappling, all of a sudden size doesn't seem to make a big difference anymore, you know? And so I'm not counting Conor out completely, but Chris can fight, you know, no doubt about it. So to me, even if it wasn't the saga of the fathers before that, because at the end of the day, neither of them are their fathers, I don't think. I don't think either of them are their fathers. I think if it was just this type of a matchup, I think it's an interesting, great, attention-getting type fight. So I like it, but the weight could be a problem. But I think I might go out on a limb here and say I'm just liking Conor's attitude a little bit better.
Interesting. Very interesting. That fight's about what? Like we're 10 days away or so, early October. It's going to be very interesting. 2 quick questions, Callum, before we let you go. Thank you so much for being generous with your time this evening. Fans want to know, you're a humble champion such as yourself. What do you make of all these influencers and some of the big mouths we're seeing more and more in boxing? When someone, if you and Arthur fight, it's going to be a fight between 2 gentlemen outside the ring, but who have a ton of power and bring the skills inside the ring. What do you make when you see some of these big name influencers get all the limelight these days?
It's each to their own. It's some people, that's some people's characters. Some people like to do it. Some people believe you've got to do that to make money or get fights and stuff. Whereas I've always been a quiet kid anyway, and I just always had the belief if I'm good enough and I keep winning, I'll get to where I want to be. I'll become a world champion, and if you become a world champion, then you'll earn your money. And it's just never in my character to be that type of person. I know some people are, and some people as fans like to see that. They like to watch it, whether they want to watch them win or lose. It does get people watching it. It's just never been my cup of tea, but each to their own if you want to do it. I think you're setting yourself up for a bigger fall, but that's the risk people take, I think.
Interesting. We know what Russ feels about that, but we've heard his thoughts enough about it. Just real quickly before say goodbye to Callum, Russ, the fans want to know, is your worst nightmare kind of Arthur versus Callum, right? Like in terms of you personally, like you don't want that to happen, right, Russ?
No, I can't say I don't want it to happen, because then I would be depriving 2 people who I think very highly of you know, fighting in a great fight, and deservedly so, that they should be meeting each other. But you know, it's not something that I'm going to be able to choose camps on, because I've been with Callum since 2014. I've been with Beterbiev since the start of his career, and I know that these things happen in sport, you know. And I think I'm hoping that either guy respects the fact that I can't take a side on this, you know, and that I'm going to disqualify myself from this, and may the best man win and do your thing. And it breaks my heart to do that, but it would break my heart even more if I had to choose one or the other, and I won't do that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Callum, any final thoughts you want to say before I say? I know some fans here, a lot of people are on the message board. I guess I'm sure you appreciate the fan base and the love you get in the UK.
Yeah, always. I've got great support back home, especially in Liverpool, and I appreciate it all, and I'm proud to represent them on the biggest stage as big as I can. And thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much, Russ. Stick around if you can. We'll say bye to Callum, and we just have some bit of news to get to, Russ. But have a great evening, Callum. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Callum, say hi to everybody. Say hi to your dad for me and everybody, okay?
See you soon, Russ.
All right, man. Russ,
just real quick here, before kind of we move on, we have some news on the podcast version. But first, just your thoughts on Callum Smith. He's a genuine guy, right? Like old school, just comes to fight, but not interested in the trash talk.
And very respectable. You know, I mean, this is why I've always said to you, I don't understand when you have examples out there of fighters like this. Why do new fighters coming along choose to emulate the bad examples in boxing and not the good examples in boxing? You know, and we have a lot of them. It's not that they're few and far between. There's a lot of good, classy people who represent the sport greatly. Callum being one of them, and you know, I think that makes the sport that much better. But I guess it takes all kinds.
Yeah, well, and two of the people you work with is Callum Smith and Arthur Beterbiev. And you told me at this stage of your career, there are some fighters you would personally refuse to work with, correct me if I'm wrong, if you really did not believe in the way they went about their business. Am I correct?
1,000%. And one day, I'll tell you a story about the Eubank Benn fight.
Oh, well, there you go, teasing the fans. Okay, and for the fans, they might have seen the announcement on our social media today. This is the English version of the Callum Russ Anber podcast, which we've been doing now for about 70-something episodes, a little bit more than a year, and the fans appreciate it. We're working on getting it on different platforms, audio. That's the message I always get, but good news for those who also in Canada, and especially French-speaking, I guess theoretically in France as well. We have some MBLE fans who tuned in when we did it. We're taking the podcast on the French side as well, right, Russ?
If you say we are, yeah, no, of course we are. Yes, indeed. Yes,
so,
indeed.
We're going to be starting next week. This won't be on Instagram, but it'll be on all audio platforms, TVA Sports. Le Dernier Round with Russ Anber in French. We're going to be able to do a lot of the Quebec fight scene as well. And if the English is not stopping, it will be maybe a bit more sporadic, but we'll keep you tuned in with all the guests. And that's it. Any final thoughts, Russ, on what we're going to do on the French podcast or anything that happened in the world of boxing?
I'm hoping, and you tell me if we're going to do this or not, because I'm hoping that the Dernier Round is going to be interactive, that the Quebec fan base is going to have a chance to speak to us,
100%.
to ask the questions, to let them lay out the platform of what they would like the show to be about. Because sometimes, you know, we talk about things, we talk about certain fights, and we omit others because obviously we're restricted to time and we have to kind of stay condensed in what we do. But I want the Quebec fans, what do they want to hear about? You know, who do they want to talk about? What are the questions they have? What are their interests? Because it's fair to say that, you know, you talked about the UK being such a dominant fan base in boxing.
That's right.
In Canada, Quebecers, in the soul of the sporting Quebecer lies boxing, you know, and it's part of their makeup. It's part of their sports makeup. They love boxing. And that's who I want to hear from. I want to hear from the soul of the Quebecer who loves boxing. To me, that's very important. It's where I began my career. It's where I'll end my career. It's where I developed my career. It's where I learned my career was about the boxing that happened here in Quebec, starting 1979, actively as a trainer since 1979, and just before that as a fan and as an amateur fighter. But to me, that's the most important thing. And I want the fan base to understand that they have a voice in Quebec, and I want to be able to respond to that. I want to appeal to their soul.
Very appeal to their soul. That's deep. Very deep, Mr. Anber. And good news, the Wi-Fi works. So it's clearly not the iPad. I don't think that's the issue, by the way, for the inside baseball there of your Wi-Fi.
Well, you see, apparently this is because all of us get on it at the same time. Now, this is what the boss next door says. See, in the wall next door. That's
right.
We gotta see if that's true or not. But
okay.
I'm glad it held up, and it was great having Callum on. And one of my favorite fighters, by the way, whose corner I work, you know, even Beefy, you know, being in there. The reason being, you feel like you're part of the win because they listen to the advice. They take what you have to say and they go out and do it, and it brings success. That makes me feel very special, you know, and so I enjoy being part of that team.
It was a great conversation with Callum Smith. We'll be able to upload everything tomorrow. It'll be Thursday on YouTube and the social media platforms. You'll have the conversation if you miss it with Callum Smith. To us, we'll do this again next week, and we will be starting as well our French podcast in a few days. So thank you everyone for tuning in. To us, talk soon.
Sugar, say bye. See you.
Take care, everyone.